Eddie Slovik was born in Detroit, Michigan in 1920. Detroit, during this time, was a bustling city, known for its booming automotive industry and vibrant cultural scene. However, not everyone shared in the prosperity. He had a troubled youth, facing run-ins with the law. The Great Depression had a profound impact on many families, and Eddie's was no exception. Economic hardships often led young men like Eddie into petty crimes and misdemeanors. As a young adult, Slovik struggled to hold down jobs. The scarcity of stable employment during the 1930s meant that many young men drifted from one job to another, never finding a true calling or steady income. In 1942, he was drafted into the U.S. Army, a common experience for many young men during World War II. The draft was a turning point for many, pulling them from their everyday lives and thrusting them into the global conflict. Life in the Army was a challenge for Slovik. The rigorous training, strict discipline, and the constant pressure to perform were overwhelming for someone who had never experienced such structure. He struggled with the strict discipline and harsh realities of war. The transition from civilian life to military life was jarring, and many soldiers found it difficult to adapt. He was deployed to Europe in 1944 as part of the 28th Infantry Division. This division was known for its bravery and resilience, often being placed in some of the most dangerous and pivotal battles of the war. This division saw intense fighting during the Battle of Normandy and the subsequent Allied advance. The Battle of Normandy was a critical turning point in the war, with soldiers facing fierce resistance from entrenched enemy forces. Slovik, like many soldiers, witnessed the horrors of war firsthand. The devastation, loss of life, and the sheer brutality of combat left an indelible mark on those who survived. The constant fear, exhaustion, and loss took a toll on him. The psychological strain of continuous combat, coupled with the physical demands, pushed many soldiers to their breaking points. The conditions were brutal, with soldiers facing cold, wet weather, limited supplies, and the ever-present threat of enemy fire. The harsh environments, combined with the relentless pace of the war, made survival a daily struggle. In October 1944, Slovik's unit was engaged in heavy combat in France. The intensity of the battles was overwhelming, with constant gunfire and explosions creating a chaotic and terrifying environment for the soldiers. During one particularly chaotic firefight, Slovik became separated from his unit. The confusion and noise made it nearly impossible for him to find his comrades amidst the chaos. Shaken by the experience, Slovik sought shelter in a nearby building. For a period of 6 days, he remained isolated, struggling to survive on his own, away from the safety and support of his company. Upon rejoining his unit, Slovik admitted to his company commander that he had been separated. He recounted the harrowing experience of being alone and the fear that gripped him during those 6 days. He also expressed his fear of returning to combat. The thought of facing the enemy again filled him with dread and anxiety. Slovik believed he was not emotionally equipped for the demands of frontline service. The constant threat of death and the horrors of war had taken a toll on his mental state. Despite his pleas and the evident distress he was in, Slovik was ordered back to the front lines. His superiors believed that every soldier was needed in the fight against the enemy. He was informed that his actions constituted desertion. The military had strict rules, and leaving one's post, especially during combat, was considered a grave offense. Desertion, especially in the face of the enemy, was a serious offense. The consequences were severe, and the military sought to make an example of those who abandoned their duties. Slovik's case would become a significant moment in military history, highlighting the harsh realities and strict discipline of wartime service. Slovik was court-martialed on November 11, 1944, near the town of Saint-Menehould, France. This small French town became the backdrop for a significant moment in military history. He was charged with desertion, a grave offense during the intense days of World War II. Desertion was seen as a betrayal, not just to the army, but to the nation and fellow soldiers fighting on the front lines. The trial was swift, lasting only a single day. In the midst of war, the military justice system operated with a sense of urgency and efficiency, often at the expense of thorough deliberation. Slovik pleaded guilty to the charges. His admission was straightforward, but it carried the weight of a man who knew the consequences of his actions. Despite his guilty plea, Slovik maintained that he was not a coward. He stood firm, trying to explain his side of the story to the court. He argued that his actions were driven by fear and panic, not malicious intent. Slovik's defense was a plea for understanding, a cry that his human frailty should not be mistaken for treachery. However, the court-martial found him guilty and sentenced him to death. The decision was harsh, reflecting the unforgiving nature of wartime discipline. On January 31, 1945, Eddie Slovik was executed by firing squad. The execution was carried out with military precision, a stark reminder of the consequences of desertion. The execution took place in France, near the village of Saint Menehould. This location, once a quiet village, became a historical site marked by this somber event. The execution made Slovik a symbol of the harsh realities of military justice during wartime. His story serves as a poignant reminder of the severe measures taken to maintain order and discipline in the face of chaos and conflict.